Comment on the video, where are people watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. In the quiet community of Willow Creek, Richard Malone had recently settled into his new home, anticipating a peaceful life after years of bustling city living. His delight, however, was short-lived. Within days of moving in, Richard began receiving a series of notices from the local Homeowners Association, HOA, a group he was unaware his home was subject to. The notices, each more petty and trivial than the last, claimed violations ranging from the length of his lawn grass to the incorrect disposal of recycling. The correspondence was marked with the authoritative insignia of the Willow Creek Community Association, each letter more demanding and severe. These so-called violations came with fines that started small but quickly escalated, threatening further action if not promptly resolved. Richard, puzzled and frustrated, scrutinized his property deeds and documents only to confirm what he initially believed: his property was not part of any HOA jurisdiction. The fines seemed particularly absurd given Richard's meticulous nature. His lawn was always immaculately trimmed, and his recycling bins were sorted with precision. It became evident that these were not legitimate grievances but rather fabricated charges aimed at harassing him. Each notice bore the name of the HOA president, Eleanor Voss, a name that quickly became synonymous with unwarranted authoritarianism in Richard's view. Richard's attempts to contact Eleanor and resolve these misunderstandings were futile. Calls went unanswered, and letters were returned unopened. The situation escalated when a final notice arrived, stating that if the fines were not paid, legal action would be pursued. The stress of these baseless accusations began to take its toll on Richard, casting a shadow over his new home's warm glow. One brisk morning, as Richard was tending to his garden, he was approached by Eleanor Voss herself. With an air of condescension, she handed him another notice of violation. This time, the alleged offense was even more ludicrous: unauthorized garden decor. Eleanor, with her clipboard clutched tightly, detailed the fines and repercussions with a tone that brooked no argument. Richard, having reached his limit, confronted Eleanor about the legitimacy of her claims. He pointed out the inconsistencies and the lack of jurisdiction her HOA had over his property. Eleanor, unfazed, insisted that his property was under their governance and that compliance was not optional. The heated exchange grew intense as Richard categorically rejected the false charges and Eleanor's authority over his home. Eleanor threatened further penalties and left with a promise that the matter would be escalated to legal channels. Richard, determined not to be bullied into submission, decided to investigate the legality of these charges and Eleanor's authority. His resolve solidified: he would not bend to the whims of a tyrannical HOA president who seemed to thrive on control and intimidation. The confrontation with Eleanor had ignited a fire within Richard. He began meticulously gathering all communications and notices from the HOA, documenting every false charge and unfounded claim. Armed with his evidence, Richard sought legal counsel to dispute the HOA's authority over his property. In his meeting with the lawyer, Richard laid out his case, presenting the detailed logs and correspondence that highlighted the absurdity and frequency of the fines. His lawyer, intrigued by the audacity of the HOA's claims, agreed that Richard's property was not part of the HOA and that Eleanor's actions were overreaching at best and potentially illegal at worst. Empowered by legal support, Richard drafted a formal letter to the HOA, denying their claims and demanding a cessation of all harassment. He cited the specific legal boundaries that Eleanor had crossed and warned of potential legal repercussions if the harassment did not stop immediately. As days passed, the atmosphere around Richard's home grew tense. He noticed unusual activities, like unfamiliar cars parked near his home at odd hours, and he suspected that Eleanor was not going to retreat quietly. Despite the unnerving developments, Richard remained steadfast, prepared to defend his rights and his home from the baseless tyranny of a fabricated HOA authority. In the days following his defiant correspondence with Eleanor Voss, Richard Malone's quiet life in Willow Creek was abruptly shattered by a series of disturbing events. One early morning, while Richard prepared his coffee and surveyed his cherished garden, once his sanctuary of calm, he discovered that the front yard had been deliberately vandalized. The once pristine flower beds were trampled, and decorative stones had been scattered with malicious disregard. His prized lavender bushes were defaced by crude graffiti, a scrawled warning that underscored the cruelty behind these acts. This devastation was not random, it was a targeted message of intimidation meant to unsettle him and, by extension, the community. Richard's heart pounded as he inspected the damage. The vandalism was artfully destructive, a clear statement from those aligned with Eleanor's twisted agenda. Rumors in the neighborhood soon began to circulate like wildfire. Whispers in hushed tones mentioned a fabricated warrant being issued against him for ignoring the impossible fines levied on his property. The notion of a warrant, however fabricated it might have been, was enough to induce fear. Neighbors, once respectful and cordial, now exchanged apprehensive glances every time Richard stepped outside, and the atmosphere was thick with dread. Unable to ignore the escalating threats, Richard took measures to secure his property. He installed security cameras along the perimeter and started documenting every unusual occurrence. It wasn't long before the cameras captured shadowy figures lurking around his garden in the dead of night, individuals concealed by hooded jackets whose deliberate action suggested careful planning. Although the faces were never fully seen, the timing and method of their trespasses strongly implicated that the harassment was orchestrated by forces connected to Eleanor Voss's rogue operations. The constant intimidation began to gnaw at the sense of safety that had once been intrinsic to Willow Creek. Richard could see that the vandalism and the ominous rumors were tools of control, intended to subdue any resistance from those who dared question the authority of the HOA under Eleanor's command. Even as the community began to whisper in fear, Richard resolved not to cower. Every act of vandalism further ignited his determination to expose the injustice that had infiltrated the neighborhood. Richard's investigations quickly revealed a disturbing pattern. The dates of the vandalism, the delivery of threatening letters, and the odd visits by unknown individuals all coincided with a timetable that Eleanor Voss had established for stepping up her oppressive measures. The messages, replete with ominous warnings and absurd citations, were designed to confuse and terrify not only him but also to discourage any public outcry from his neighbors. The meticulously orchestrated harassment was intended to create a climate in which fear silenced dissent. Feeling increasingly isolated, Richard reached out to a few trusted neighbors. Initially, many had been reluctant to get involved, their voices subdued by the ever-growing specter of retribution. But as Richard presented his documented evidence and shared the disturbing security footage, the cautious whispers transformed into determined murmurs. A small collective emerged, united by a shared determination to reclaim their community from the clutches of tyranny. This grassroots resistance slowly gathered momentum, as others recounted their own encounters with unfounded fines and unjustified property inspections initiated by Eleanor's operatives. The intimidation tactics were no longer isolated acts of vandalism, they had grown into a systematic campaign designed to paralyze community members through fear. Richard realized that the stability and peace of Willow Creek were under siege, and that the well-being of every resident was at stake. His resolve hardened, and he prepared himself for the looming confrontation. Now, not only was his own sense of security compromised, but the very spirit of the community was being eroded. That fateful morning, amid the echo of shattered tranquility and the chilling whispers of fabricated warrants, Richard Malone resolved to fight back. He recognized that these acts of vandalism and intimidation were the precursor to something far larger, a full-blown campaign of terror engineered by Eleanor Voss, whose unchecked ambition now posed a threat to every law-abiding member of Willow Creek. The tension in Willow Creek reached an explosive peak one bright autumn afternoon when Richard Malone was unexpectedly confronted by a scene that tested the limits of his patience and resolve. On that day, as he was reviewing his growing dossier of evidence regarding the harassment he had endured, two men appeared at his door, clad in uniforms resembling those of the HOA enforcement arm. Their expressions were stern and their demeanor cold, lending a semblance of official authority to their presence. However, what followed was as shocking as it was revealing. The doorbell rang sharply, and before Richard could even brace himself, the two men burst into the foyer with a sense of urgency that was both dramatic and foreboding. One of them thrust a piece of paper into his hand, a warrant, it claimed, for Richard's arrest. The document was adorned with the same insignia Richard had seen on previous notices and was accompanied by stern warnings about the consequences of defying the HOA's orders. In that disquieting moment, Richard's heart raced. He had heard rumors of such tactics, but nothing could have prepared him for the actual confrontation. As the two men began to recite a litany of fabricated violations, it became increasingly obvious that the entire procedure was nothing more than an elaborate ruse. With a calmness that belied the chaos of the moment, Richard slowly reached for his concealed identity badge, a symbol of his true position and authority. In a firm and resolute tone, he declared, "I am Richard Malone, a United States Marshal." The words reverberated through the room, stalling the would-be enforcers in mid-sentence. Shock and disbelief were etched across the faces of the impostors, who had expected submission rather than exposure. With his badge clearly visible, Richard recounted his documented evidence of harassment and abuse, detailing every instance of intimidation and fraudulent fines. The men, now visibly rattled, fumbled with the warrant as it became painfully clear that they had been duped. Eleanor Voss's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble as Richard's declaration appended her scheme in real time. The impostors, having acted on nothing more than fabricated orders and false authority, could only stammer incoherently before retreating. Their sudden retreat did not erase the danger that had just transpired, but it did serve as a public repudiation of the farce that Eleanor had been peddling to the community. In the aftermath, Richard took no chances. He immediately contacted local law enforcement to report the attempted wrongful arrest, ensuring that the incident was recorded as part of the larger investigation into Eleanor Voss's corrupt activities. His courageous act not only defused a dangerous situation but also emboldened his neighbors and fellow residents. Word spread quickly through Willow Creek, and the incident galvanized the community, demonstrating that the forces of tyranny could be challenged with truth and tenacity. For Richard, the bogus arrest attempt was a turning point. It was the moment that forced the hidden mechanics of Eleanor's extortion to the forefront, revealing that her tactics were not limited to mere paper shuffling, but escalated to physical intimidation and the misuse of law enforcement procedures. The exposure of the impostors, aided by Richard's decisive reveal of his true identity, opened a floodgate of public outrage and catalyzed further investigation into the HOA's operations. This event marked a critical juncture. It turned onlookers into active participants in the fight for justice. Neighbors who had once remained silent began to share their own stories of harassment, and the collective anger allowed Richard's team to gather substantial evidence that would later aid legal proceedings. The bogus warrant incident was not only a personal victory but also a symbolic moment for the entire Willow Creek community. A stark reminder that deception and abuse would no longer be tolerated. In the weeks that followed, the incident was discussed in every household, served as a rallying cry against Eleanor Voss's regime, and became a key piece of evidence as the legal authorities began to unravel her vast network of corruption. Richard Malone's bravery in exposing the false arrest attempt cemented his reputation not only as a defender of his own rights but as a guardian of justice for the community at large. After the shocking bogus arrest attempt, Richard Malone was more determined than ever to expose the corrupt underpinnings of Eleanor Voss's reign over Willow Creek. His journey to uncover the full extent of the fraud began with a deep dive into the administrative records and financial files that had long been kept hidden behind the polished veneer of the Homeowners Association. Richard began by collecting every document and notice that had been served to him and his neighbors. The pile of paperwork, filled with obscure citations and intimidating fines, hinted at an intricate and deliberate scheme designed not only to fill the coffers of the HOA but also to terrify property owners into compliance. Determined to leave no stone unturned, Richard enlisted the help of a trusted accountant from a neighboring town, whose expertise in forensic auditing revealed patterns that were impossible to ignore. In what he later described as a painstaking but necessary investigation, Richard discovered that the fines levied by Eleanor Voss's administration were not based on any verifiable violations. Instead, he found that these arbitrary fines were part of a broader extortion racket. Digging further, Richard uncovered evidence of kickbacks linked to local vendors, inflated charges on community services, and fraudulent billing practices that siphoned money from unsuspecting residents directly into Eleanor's personal accounts. Documents revealed that contracts for maintenance and repair jobs had been awarded to companies with clear ties to Eleanor's inner circle. The audit uncovered alarming discrepancies in the budget reports, sums of money that appeared and disappeared without a trace, and payments made for work that never actually took place. Richard realized he had stumbled on a highly organized network of corruption, one that exploited the trust and vulnerability of the community. As the evidence piled up, Richard decided to take action. He convened a small group of affected homeowners, presenting his findings in a series of confidential meetings held in the back room of a local community center. The revelations were met with shock and indignation. Many residents had no idea that they were being systematically overcharged and manipulated through fraudulent fines. What emerged from these meetings was a collective resolve to bring the operation into the light. Richard and his allies gathered testimonials from neighbors who had received inexplicable bills, copies of notices, and even security footage that documented the intimidating visits by Eleanor's agents. Together, they created a meticulously organized dossier that detailed every instance of financial malpractice and abuse of power. The assembly of such overwhelming evidence marked the turning point, enabling them to contact legal authorities and independent auditors. Local law enforcement, initially skeptical of the claims, soon became convinced by the thorough documentation provided by Richard. With support from the district attorney's office, a formal investigation into the HOA's activities was launched. Eleanor Voss's long-practiced secrecy was crumbling, the once imposing facade of control was yielding to the relentless scrutiny of justice. Throughout the investigation, Richard maintained a stoic presence amid rising tensions and occasional threats from those loyal to Eleanor. His unwavering determination not only fortified his own resolve but also galvanized the community. For many in Willow Creek, Richard had transformed from a lone victim into a beacon of transparency and accountability. In his quest to expose the fraud, he was not simply fighting for himself but for every resident who had been exploited and intimidated. The exposure of the fraud network had far-reaching implications. It illuminated how a single individual, wielding unchecked power, could orchestrate a vast web of deceit and extortion. The investigation's progress signaled a watershed moment for Willow Creek, as residents prepared to reclaim their community from the grips of corruption. With the evidence now in the hands of legal authorities, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation with Eleanor Voss and her cronies. As the investigation advanced, the legal consequences of Eleanor Voss's fraudulent actions became inevitable. With mounting evidence of extortion, financial malfeasance, and intimidation, Richard Malone found himself at the center of a legal storm that would reshape Willow Creek's future. The community, once paralyzed by fear, began to rally around him, insisting that justice be served. The court proceedings were set in motion quickly. Local prosecutors, bolstered by the extensive documentation Richard and the homeowner coalition had assembled, charged Eleanor with a series of criminal offenses. The charges ranged from fraud and extortion to impersonation and vandalism related to the intimidation campaign. The courtroom became the battleground where Richard's evidence was pitted against the elaborate facade of the HOA's authoritarian rule. During the trial, Richard's calm testimony stood in stark contrast to the frantic admissions of the HOA's enforcers. His detailed account of the myriad abuses, complete with photographs, financial records, and video evidence, left little doubt about the extent of Eleanor's corruption. One key moment was his presentation of the audio-visual recordings that documented shadowy figures vandalizing his property, an incontrovertible demonstration of the intimidation tactics that had plagued him and his neighbors. The prosecution built a compelling narrative, illustrating how Eleanor had exploited her position to create an environment of fear and submission. Eyewitnesses, emboldened by Richard's example, came forward to testify about their own experiences of harassment, unfair fines, and intrusive inspections. Their testimonies provided a human face to the extensive documentation and added emotional weight to the charges. In a dramatic climax to the trial, the jury deliberated for only a few days before returning a verdict that left the courtroom in stunned silence. Eleanor Voss was found guilty on multiple counts, her actions condemned as a gross abuse of power. The sentence, heavy and uncompromising, was designed to serve as a deterrent against any future attempts to manipulate community governance for personal gain. Comment down below where you're watching from and don't forget to like and subscribe if you hate Karen. 5 minutes before noon, the backyard of 12, Juniper Lane was a postcard of early summer ease. 7-year-old Liam and his 9-year-old sister Maya bobbed in their bright blue inflatable pool, goggles askew, shrieking with the pure delight only the first Saturday of vacation can brew. Their mother, Alex Morales, dashed inside for what she expected to be a 2-minute bathroom break, leaving the sliding door ajar so she could still hear the splash symphony. Those 120 seconds proved long enough for chaos to vault the cedar fence. Karen, self-appointed guardian of the Sandstone Ridge HOA ethos, seized the moment. The 40-something neighbor, khaki visor, whistle on a lanyard like she'd been hired by an invisible aquatic authority, marched across the lawn. Without greeting or explanation, she leaned over the rim of the pool and seized Liam's forearm as if hauling contraband from a river. "Out! You don't belong here," she barked, voice slicing the June air. Startled, Liam slipped beneath the surface while Maya's floa tie spun sideways. Chlorinated water sloshed over the deck, a beach ball rolled toward the tomato planters. Alex, hearing the commotion, rounded the corner just in time to witness Karen's second lunge, this one aimed at Maya's elbow. The girl recoiled, eyes wide, thin scream strangled by confusion. In that instant, Alex's backyard no longer felt like home but an occupied zone patrolled by a stranger's delusion. For a heartbeat Alex froze, processing the surreal tableau, her children terrified in their own pool, a neighbor's fingers digging into sun-warmed skin, and no rational thread connecting the two. Then maternal adrenaline surged. Alex vaulted the deck steps, voice already rising, unaware that within the next quarter-hour police sirens would wail, alliances would pivot, and Karen's self-assumed jurisdiction would implode in public view. Sirens wailed before Alex could finish the sentence that was already shredding her vocal cords. Liam and Maya clung to the pool's rim, half out of fright, half to keep Karen's flailing hands from yanking them ashore. The neighbor's cell phone was still pressed to her ear, broadcasting shrill commentary to 911, minor intruders, private pool, urgent. She punctuated each word by splashing water toward the kids as if baptism could cleanse the trespass in her imagination. Alex wedged herself between Karen and the pool, planting bare feet on wet deck boards. "Touch them again and you'll need an ambulance before the police arrive." The threat shocked even herself. She was a graphic designer who did morning yoga, not a bouncer. But adrenaline makes new job descriptions. Karen recoiled, visor askew, face blotchy with a rage that seemed older than this moment. "They aren't registered residents," she hissed, waving toward the cul-de-sac where patrol car lights now strobed red-blue across sun-drenched maple leaves. "We screen newcomers for the HOA. It's policy." "Your policy ends at my fence line," Alex shot back, wrapping towels around trembling shoulders. She ushered the kids behind her just as two uniformed officers stepped through the open gate. Officer Nora Patel led, cool professionalism in midsummer heat. "We received a call about possible intruders," she said, scanning the scene, children shivering, neighbor panting, mother vibrating with anger. Her partner, Officer Derek Shaw, jotted notes. Karen launched into frantic narration. Unauthorized swimmers, suspicious behavior, homeowner absenteeism, until Patel raised a palm. "Ma'am, please clarify, whose property is this?" "It's hers," Karen admitted, jerking a thumb at Alex, "but the children are mine," Alex finished, handing over driver's license and utility bill she'd pre-pulled from a patio drawer once sirens echoed. Shaw compared the address, nodding. Maya sniffled. Liam hid behind the towel like a miniature caped crusader. Patel's tone flattened. "Ma'am, did you climb a fence and physically grab these minors?" "They were violating HOA rules," Karen snapped, as though citation trumped consent. Shaw clicked his pen. "Which rule allows physical contact?" Silence. A sparrow chirped, oblivious. Patel turned to Alex. "Do you wish to press charges for trespass and simple assault?" Alex glanced at her kids. Maya's chin quivered, Liam's goggles fogged with hot tears. Memory flashed, little arms yanked mid-laugh, innocence pierced. "Yes," she breathed. "I do." Handcuffs glinted like chrome punctuation. Karen's protest rose, shrill and sputtering, until Shaw read Miranda rights that soaked the air in finality. Neighbors peeked over fences, camera phones appeared. Within minutes Karen sat in the back of the cruiser, visor abandoned on Alex's lawn like a surrender flag. Patel handed Alex a card. "Victim services will call within 48 hours. Get that gate latch repaired," she accessed by standing on a planter. Alex nodded, relief colliding with aftershocks. Liam asked, "Is the pool closed?" Patel crouched to his level. "Pool's open, buddy. The rules are simple, you belong, she doesn't." When the cruiser rolled off, Maya whispered, "Mommy, what does HOA even mean?" Alex hugged them close, eyes on retreating taillights. "Sometimes," she said, "it stands for hardly our authority." Part 3, Ripples beneath the surface. 2 hours after sirens faded, quiet returned to Juniper Lane. But Alex's mind raced louder than any patrol car. She set the kids up with popsicles and cartoons, retreated to the kitchen island, and opened her laptop. If Karen's madness could steamroll an afternoon, what groundwork had been laid long before? Browser tabs multiplied, Sandstone Ridge HOA bylaws, neighborhood Facebook posts, county property records. She saw a timeline emerge like patterns in code. 3 months earlier HOA newsletter bragged about a new neighborhood integrity initiative. In small print, all residents encouraged to report unfamiliar individuals for safety verification. Asterisk led to nothing. 6 weeks earlier a thread on the local Facebook group, Karen chastising teens for skateboarding, tagging them as outsiders, despite 3 commenters confirming they lived 3 blocks away. Last week door-to-door leaflet, Karen's handwriting, urging families to register children's photos, to streamline security. Alex realized she'd tossed that note unread into recycling. The woman's obsession with gatekeeping had long incubated. Her phone buzzed, caller ID read Gus, across the street. She answered. "Just heard what happened," Gus rumbled. "Half the block's mortified. Karen's been sniffing for a showdown." Alex exhaled. It was a showdown all right. The kids are rattled. Town hall meets Monday. You'll have support. He paused, conspiratorial. Word as Karen called the HOA president from the cruiser, begging for a statement. They're backpedaling. Support was comforting, but Alex foresaw backlash too. The HOA wielded fines like fly swatters, they could make life bureaucratically miserable. She drafted an email to Renee Gordon, HOA president, concise account, police case number, intention to install security cameras. She hit send, unwilling to hide. That evening, Liam refused the pool. He sat on the deck steps clutching his snorkel. What if the yelling lady comes back? Maya patted his back. Alex's chest tightened, fear had replaced carefree splashing. She needed to reclaim that water for them. She texted her husband, Diego, away on a business trip, kids shaken. Karen arrested. Can you fly home early? Dots pulsed. His reply, on standby list. Be there tomorrow night. At bedtime, Alex watched the children's slow breathing, then returned to the yard under porch light glow. Chlorine scented the humid air, ripples lapped softly against vinyl walls, echoing questions. How deep did HOA authority run? How many neighbors silently judged Liam's caramel skin or Maya's curly hair as foreign? She dipped a toe into the water, still warm, still theirs. In the reflection, moonlight shimmered like a promise, tomorrow, they'd swim again. But first, Alex would pull every rotten plank of prejudice into daylight. Part 4. Paper shields and porcelain masks. Monday dawned with Diego's red-eye flight landing at 6 a.m. He arrived bleary but determined, hugging Liam and Maya so tightly they squeaked. Over breakfast churros he got the full replay, tiny hands mimicking Karen's claws, siren sound effects supplied by Maya. Rage tightened his jaw, but he listened, nodded, and said, "We fix this together. Step 1, repair the gate latch." While Diego drilled a tamper-proof strike plate, Alex compiled a dossier. She printed screenshots of Karen's Facebook crusades, stitched phone footage of Saturday's arrest, and flagged bylaws the HOA president seemed content to ignore when convenient. At 5 p.m., the town hall meeting convened in the elementary school multipurpose room. Rows of plastic chairs filled with homeowners fanning themselves with agenda sheets. A banner read, "Sandstone Ridge, Stronger Together." The irony made Alex's teeth ache. Renee Gordon opened with strained smile. "We're here to address an unfortunate misunderstanding." Murmurs rippled. Alex raised her hand, dossier on lap. "Misunderstanding implies mutual error. My children were assaulted." Eyebrows lifted, phones began recording. Renee gestured toward microphone. Alex stood, pulse thrumming, and recounted Saturday in meticulous detail, evidence slides projected from a USB she'd loaded with the custodian beforehand. Gasps punctuated the timeline. Diego flanked her like a silent pillar. When she finished, Karen's ally Marilyn Webb tried deflection. Karen felt unsafe. Karen crossed a fence. Alex interjected, pointing to slide of Karen's hands yanking Liam. "That isn't safety, that's assault." Gus rose next. "I watched her trespass. If the kids weren't caramel-skinned, would she still yell, 'You're kind'?" Silence thickened. Renee cleared her throat. "The board condemns discrimination. We'll review conduct at a later." Diego stepped to Mike. "Later is how rot spreads. The bylaws mention inclusivity but give no protocol for bias complaints. Let's draft one now." Whispers turned to murmurs of agreement. A lanky teen stood, Caleb, the skater Karen once harassed. "She called me thug for using the sidewalk. I live on Birch Street." More hands raised. Stories spilled, extra scrutiny for delivery drivers of color, Karen photographing gardeners, fines skewed toward newer families. Renee's porcelain composure cracked. "We hear you." Effective immediately, I propose a diversity and security task force chaired by, she scanned the crowd, Alex Morales. Applause erupted, surprising Alex most of all. She nodded, throat tight. "Happy to serve, if we replace fear with facts." A vote passed overwhelmingly. HOA members signed up on a clipboard that had once been Karen's symbol of dominance. Outside, dusk settled warm. Liam tugged Alex's sleeve. "Does this mean the pool is safe again?" She knelt eye level. "Safer every day we stand up," she said, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Karen's house lights remained off that night. Rumor said bail conditions forbade contact with minors. The porcelain mask of neighborhood harmony had shattered. What rose now was rougher, realer, but theirs. Part 5. The long dive to accountability task force meetings began in Alex's garage, folding chairs flanked by glitter-painted bikes. Members built a three-pronged plan: education. Distribute flyers on trespass laws, implicit bias, and proper use of 911. Reporting. Create an online portal for anonymous incident logs, reviewed monthly. Celebration. Host inclusive events, culture cookouts, to humanize neighbors beyond curb appeal. Diego designed the website, Gus offered barbecue expertise, Caleb built social media channels. HOA funds, once funneled into Shrub Height citations, now purchased bilingual safety pamphlets. Karen's court date approached. Alex received subpoena as witness. Her stomach lurched but voice remained steady on the stand. The prosecuting attorney played poolside footage. Karen's lawyer argued momentary lapse, but jury saw intent in every frame. Verdict: guilty of misdemeanor battery and criminal trespass. Sentence: 60 days probation, already counting 3 under house arrest, mandatory anger management, and $3,000 restitution for emotional distress. Reporters waited outside. Alex shielded the kids from cameras, offering only a brief statement: "Justice isn't punishment, it's restoration. We're focused on rebuilding community." Summer advanced. Culture Cookout #1 featured Diego's carne asada, Mrs. Chen's dumplings, Caleb's impossible spice chili. Liam learned to skateboard from Caleb, Maya taught sidewalk chalk art to toddlers. Laughter replaced suspicion in alleyways. Restitution check arrived mid-July. Alex used a portion to install a permanent above-ground pool, steel-walled, filtered, topped by LED string lights. At the unveiling, Maya performed a cannonball christening, water glittering like fireworks. Karen watched from her upstairs window, ankle monitor blinking. 2 weeks later for sale signs sprouted on her lawn. Moving truck loaded boxes labeled fragile, China, perhaps the porcelain mask would fit in a new zip code. On move-out morning, Karen paused at Alex's fence. "No visor, no clipboard." I'm sorry," she murmured. Alex studied her, seeing fatigue where fury once lived. "I hope you find peace," she said, meaning it. The truck rumbled away, exhaust fading into cicada chorus. Liam high-fived Maya. Gus popped open lemonade bottles. Diego grinned, cannonball contest. Alex nodded. They lined the deck, counted to 3, and plunged together. Submerged, Alex opened her eyes in chlorine blue clarity, sound muted, limbs buoyant. Above, sunlight refracted, turning Juniper Lane into shifting mosaics. She surfaced laughing, children shrieking joy. Not victory, continuance. Because neighborhoods, like pools, demand constant filtering, debris skimmed, chemicals balanced, vigilance daily. But when tended, they become places where everyone, every color, every age, can plunge, splash, and belong. Part 6, Echoes and Edges. Autumn draped crimson leaves over the deck rails. The diversity and security portal logged fewer complaints, most entries praised neighborly gestures, Mrs. Patel walking Mrs. Chen's dog, Caleb teaching Gus Instagram. Progress tasted sweet, yet Alex knew echoes linger. One afternoon, HOA President Renee phoned. Grant funding available for community cameras on public easements. Some worry privacy. As chair, thoughts? Alex proposed a mixed approach: strategic locations near entrances, clear signage, opt-out blocks if 70% opposed. Task force vote passed. Transparency diffused paranoia. A TV news crew requested follow-up coverage. Alex agreed on condition they highlight systemic fixes, not Karen's downfall. Liam and Maya demonstrated pool safety rules on camera, giggling. The segment aired statewide. Cul-de-sac turns conflict into connection. Trolls online claimed virtue signaling. Alex shrugged. Real neighbors mattered more. Diego, inspired, ran for HOA treasurer unopposed. He published monthly spending in Google Sheets, color-coded, green for community events, red for fines. Fines plummeted 60%. Yet one chilly night Alex found Liam staring at the dark yard. "Mom, could new Karens move here?" She knelt. "Maybe. But remember what we built: rules, friends, truth. That's stronger than fear." He exhaled foggy breath, nodded, and asked for extra marshmallows in his cocoa. Part 7. Circles of Light. Winter solstice bonfire became the task force's crowning event. Residents circled a fire pit in the cul-de-sac, each tossing in a scrap of paper bearing a fear or grievance from the past year. Liam wrote, "Kid snatch," Maya scribbled, "Loud yelling lady." They watched flames curl edges into ember confetti. Diego strummed guitar, Mrs. Chen's grandson accompanied on cajon. Snow flurried like powdered sugar under street lamps. Renee passed out lanterns. When lit, they formed rings of soft light, pulsing symbol of shared watchfulness. Alex spoke last, voice steady. "A year ago we let one person's suspicion shape our story. Tonight we write together." She released her lantern, others followed, golden orbs floating until they merged with stars. At midnight, neighbors drifted home, but Caleb and Gus lingered to douse embers. Gus clapped Caleb's shoulder. "Not bad for a skateboard punk." Caleb grinned. Alex snapped a photo. Generations bridged by trust. Back inside, Liam and Maya slept beneath new quilts stitched with maples and waves. Alex kissed their foreheads. As she closed the door, she glimpsed the lantern's afterglow through frosted glass, a constellation crafted by choice. Part 8, A letter across fences. April rain tapped the mailbox. Inside, an envelope bearing a Toronto postmark. Alex opened it, expecting junk, but froze at the signature. "Dear Morales family, therapy assignments include amends letters. You were my harshest lesson. I am grateful it ended without tragedy. I hope Juniper Lane is thriving." Karen enclosed, a cashier's check for $1,000 made out to Sandstone Ridge Community Fund. Alex showed Diego. They decided to circulate the letter, with Karen's permission, as proof that accountability can yield growth. The board voted to apply funds toward a scholarship for local teens pursuing conflict resolution training. Caleb became the first recipient. In an interview for the high school paper he said, "We learned fences aren't just to keep people out, they're places to lean and talk." Part 9, Ripple-free water. June again, sunny, cicadas thrumming. The pool hosted its first zero-gravity book club, kids floating on noodles while parents read chapters aloud. Liam chose Treasure Island, Maya Hidden Figures. Water mirrored sky, undisturbed. Alex lounged on a deck chair, sipping iced tea. She glanced at the repaired fence, no peering faces, only ivy reclaiming planks. A ping on her phone, portal update. She opened it, no complaints, just Gus posting a dad joke meme. Diego joined her, shoulder brushing hers. 1 year since everything blew up. "And look," Alex said, waving at splashing kids, neighbors chatting over hummus platters. "Not a cannonball of karma, call it waves of change." He chuckled. "Title of your TED Talk?" "Maybe." She raised her glass. To fences respected, pools protected, and communities that finally figured out the real deep end. They clinked, sunlight refracting through ice, scattering tiny rainbows across the water, the only ripples Alex wanted to see for a very long time. Richard Malone's role in the trial earned him widespread recognition. He was lauded not only for his bravery but also for his commitment to justice and community service. His actions had exposed a network of deceit that had reaped illicit profits at the expense of innocent homeowners. The verdict was celebrated as a victory for transparency and accountability, a clear repudiation of the tyranny that had once gripped Willow Creek. In the aftermath of the trial, the community did not immediately return to normalcy. The shock of the revelations and the severity of the sentence left many residents grappling with the scars of the prolonged period of intimidation. However, the conviction of Eleanor Voss laid the foundation for a new era in community governance. Legal reforms were swiftly proposed to ensure that no single individual could ever again consolidate so much power over an entire neighborhood. Richard continued to play an active role in the rebuilding process, working closely with the interim HOA board to draft policies that enshrined fairness, transparency, and accountability. The community meetings that once brimmed with fear and trepidation were replaced by open forums where every resident had a voice. Trust, once shattered, began to be pieced back together, slowly but surely, under the watchful eyes of local authorities and civic leaders. The legal reckoning had not only punished the wrongdoer but had sparked a broader conversation about governance, power, and community rights. It was a transformative moment in Willow Creek's history, proving that even the most deeply entrenched corruption could be uprooted when communities unite in the spirit of justice. In the months following the legal proceedings, Willow Creek experienced a renaissance, a transformation from an atmosphere of fear into one of hope and renewal. The conviction of Eleanor Voss was not merely a punitive measure, it marked the beginning of a community-wide healing process. Richard Malone, having borne the brunt of the corruption, emerged as a respected figure and a leader dedicated to restoring the neighborhood's trust and dignity. Under the guidance of Richard and the new interim HOA board, reform measures were rapidly implemented. New policies were enacted to ensure transparent financial practices and checks on administrative authority. The community, once subdued by intimidation, now embraced a spirit of democratic participation. Town hall meetings became a common sight, where every resident could voice concerns and offer solutions. The physical scars left by the vandalism and neglect were addressed through collective effort. Neighbors organized cleanup drives, repaired damaged public spaces, and even began tending to community gardens. Each act of rebuilding served as a symbol of their resilience. Proof that the damage inflicted by abuse of power could, with time and cooperation, be healed. Richard's personal journey was reflected in the broader transformation. No longer seen solely as a victim, he was now considered a champion of justice, an emblem of the community's fight against corruption. His actions had demonstrated that standing up for one's rights could lead to profound change, inspiring others to take action against injustice, no matter how daunting it might seem. Moreover, the saga of Willow Creek became a cautionary tale that extended beyond its borders. Local media covered the story extensively, and it sparked discussions in neighboring communities about the importance of transparent governance and citizen involvement in local affairs. The public acknowledgement of systemic abuse served as a powerful deterrent against similar practices elsewhere. As the community emerged from its long winter of oppression, celebrations of renewal grew. A large community festival was organized in the town center, symbolizing a fresh start and the re-establishment of trust between residents and local leadership. Speeches were made, and Richard was honored for his relentless pursuit of justice. In his address, he reminded everyone that vigilance and unity were the true cornerstones of a free and fair society. Willow Creek's journey from a place of shadowed fear to one of open collaboration became a beacon of hope, a message that even in the face of overwhelming abuse, justice and truth could prevail. Richard Malone's legacy, intertwined with the community's rebirth, was a testament to the enduring power of collective action. As the sun set on that hopeful day, a renewed sense of optimism pervaded every corner of Willow Creek, promising a future built on transparency, respect, and unity.